I'm happy to welcome you to another episode of Soul Story, where our goal is to bring back true values of yoga and remind that yoga is for everyone. And we are doing it with the help of yoga practitioners and yoga teachers around the world. Today, I'm very excited to welcome one of my favorite teachers, who is co-founder and director of Downward Dog Yoga Center in Toronto, Marla Meenakshi Joy. Marla is certified meditation and yoga philosophy teacher. She's completed Advanced Pranayama training in Pune, India. She's been teaching in teachers training program across US, Canada, Europe, and Asia since 1999. Marla is a teacher of Philosophy and Sanskrit, Chanting and Meditation, Ashtanga and Vinyasa Yoga, and Restorative Yoga. She is practicing Shiatsu Therapist since 1993. Marla also leads kirtan with her music band Swaha. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you,
Marla.
Thank you for having me.
Back in 1988, you went to India to study meditation and philosophy of Vedas with Swami Shyam. How did you start your meditation journey, and why did you decide to start it?
Okay. Well, I was a very curious child, and I used to ask a lot of questions, and I started to read philosophy, like Western philosophy, Nietzsche and other such philosophers, but they weren't really grabbing me so much. And I was traveling through Europe, backpacking, and I ended up in Greece, and I met this fellow who was studying with my teacher. My teacher lived in India, but he was studying with a group of people in London, England. And so he gave me a transliteration of the main, you could say, Hindu text called the Bhagavad Gita that my teacher had transliterated. And while I was there, I read this book, and I just had this amazing opening, and I knew that I had to go study with him, and I knew he was my teacher. So a bunch of really crazy things happened, but I made my way to India, and so I met my guru when I was 19, and I spent a good part of the next 15 years back and forth, but mostly there, studying at the ashram where my teacher lived in the foothills of the Himalayas. And it was basically the practice was meditation, Vedantic meditation, a little bit of Samkhya yoga, philosophy, chanting, Sanskrit, and really not a lot of asana, mostly meditation. So hours and hours of meditation and philosophy. So it was a really wonderful experience as a younger person to have and to carry forward into sharing that with people in the Western world.
How much time did you spend there?
A good part of 15 years, I would say. So I was there for 3 months, and then I came back to work a little bit, and then I was there for 2 years, and then I came back for a couple of months, and then I was back there for 9 months, and it was kind of like that for a good part of 15 years, where I was really mostly there. I would come back a little bit to make some money and go back.
And how did you encounter yoga for the first time?
Well, that was my encounter for yoga. I mean, we think of yoga in the Western world as being asana. Asana are the postures, and asana is one of the limbs. So the main philosopher in yoga is called, you could say our like great-great-grandfather is Patanjali, and the Yoga Sutras, inside of the Yoga Sutras, this textbook, it speaks about the 8 limbs. So the 8 limbs, Ashtanga, are the 8 limbs, and asana is one of the 8 limbs. So most people in the West start with asana because it's physical in nature, and people like to do things with their physical body. But for me, it started out actually as meditation, which is one of the more internal limbs. It doesn't really matter. My teacher would say it doesn't really matter. It's not like a ladder. It's more like a tree. Yoga, so you can come at it from any branch of it. But I was also a dancer, so when I did come back, eventually come back to the West and I started to teach meditation, nobody would come. So this is back in the early 90s.
Wow.
And people really had to find asana first before they started to get more interested in some of the internal practices. And then around 1995, that was when I was first introduced to Ashtanga yoga, Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga. Before that, I was practicing more of a classical Hatha yoga style, which was slower and different in nature. And so because the Ashtanga Vinyasa style is so vigorous in nature, and I was a dancer, I was drawn to it a little bit more. And then little by little, people started to come along and want to go deeper into the more internal practices. So it was good.
And what is meditation for you? Because as you said, maybe it's easier for people to start with asanas because it's a physical practice, so people can see and try to do the same. When we are thinking about meditation, usually we can think of people who just sit calmly with eyes closed, but no one really knows what's happening inside, right? Because it's an internal journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's, again, I'll refer back to Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras and the 8 limbs. He clearly sort of defines the movement from the external limbs to the internal limbs. And one of the things he says is first you start with asana, then pranayama. So you begin to control your breath. And in the ancient scriptures, they speak about the breath and the mind being one. So it's kind of like you think of the breath like the string of the kite, and the mind like the kite. So you gently pull on the string with the breath, and the mind comes with it. So with pranayama, pranayama means to expand the prana. The prana is our vital energy and our life force. So we're expanding the breath and the prana, and we in turn take the mind with us. So it's really wonderful. Even just a few minutes of working with that technique, the content of the mind, the movement of the mind begins to shift. Then we have to start to learn concentration techniques. And in this day and age, it's one of the most difficult things I find with the many distractions that we have with technology. It's very difficult to practice and unfold and cultivate concentration. But these things are really key. And one-pointedness. And having a technique with your meditation is very, very good. I'm of the old school of having a teacher, particularly with these deeper practices. So I think it's good to find a teacher to help you and to guide you, and then things come up along your journey of meditation, and a place where you're able to ask questions and talk about it, and then give a little bit more guidance. And then literally the yoga practice for us all is a practice really that we do independently on our own. But having a guide and having a teacher that we can come to or refer to can be really helpful along the way.
There are a lot of videos right now on YouTube or audios like guided meditation or a meditation with music. Would you advise to start with any of those ones?
I think that, everybody is so different, right? And now there's, millions of people on the planet doing yoga, which I think is a great thing. And everybody's coming to yoga from a different aspect of life or part of life or age or life experience. And so people are going to be drawn to yoga in a different way. So I'm not really of the philosophy of saying it has to be this way or it has to be that way. As far as I'm concerned, whatever draws you to practice yoga or one of the techniques of yoga is going to be good. And each of us inside has an innate intelligence. And that intelligence we need to listen to. So if you start with a certain practice, say you want to practice meditation with music and it works for you, but then at some point you feel like you need a change from that, or you feel like, actually I don't want the music anymore. The music we consider to be a tool. And at some point we want to let go of the tools. So it's kind of like I've got a hammer and I've got a nail and I've gotten the nail all the way in, but I'm still using the hammer, and you don't really need the hammer anymore. So something I think will unfold within, which kind of says, okay, well, I want to change this technique. I don't want that, or I feel distracted by that, or I really just maybe I want to go into nature and I want a little bit more quiet, or I need some more concentration techniques because I'm still getting really scattered, or I need some more ways in which I can expand and control and master the breath, which will be helpful. And then, you kind of get guided on a little bit of a different journey. So, yoga is really a journey, and I'm not the sort of person to say it has to be this way or it has to be another way. And if somebody comes to me as a teacher, the only thing I can really do is share with them, this is the path I've been on, this is what has worked for me, and so I'm happy to share that with you.
And how many years have you been teaching now?
Almost 30.
Almost 30 years.
Yes, yeah.
Wow. That's a long time.
I look pretty good for 90, right?
No, you look fabulous. Why did you start teaching yoga?
I taught yoga because there was really, nothing else to do, and you spend that amount of time. I also became a Shiatsu Therapist when I was quite young, so I do Shiatsu as well and hands-on healing. But it's like when you do something for so long, you just really want to share what you love. And I got hired to teach at a really sort of young age without, it was back then there was no Yoga Alliance and there was no certification. So in some ways I kind of got thrown into it. At first I got given a yoga group from a friend of mine in India who went back to India. So I started with like a group of 5 in my living room, and this is in 1991. And then it just kind of grew, and ended up in a church teaching, and then I ended up in a gym teaching. Like it kind of grew, and it naturally sort of evolved. And it's something that I think it's important, whatever we do in life, that we love and that we're passionate about. Exactly. So it actually doesn't really feel like work; it just feels like joy.
Exactly. But still, it's still work, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you one of probably my favorite questions, which I personally struggle with as well. How do you balance your personal life, your work, and your own practice?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that now, at this stage, I'm in a very lucky position that I have a studio and a team of people that do a lot for us. I think in the beginning it's more difficult for a beginning yoga teacher because you're running around doing many, many things, and so it's hard to find that balance. And then little by little you just start to carve out more and more. You figure out what feels right for you to do or not do. And I remember that period of time where I was like, you start to sort of drop a few classes, and that always feels a little weird and a little scary, but in the end you sort of trust that other things will come to you as a result of that. So, and then you sort of little by little figure out the schedule that works for you. And because I have other teachers to teach here, that's also really, that's really lucky, and I feel very blessed about that. So it allows me to have a more balanced schedule. This month, for example, it's full-on teacher training for the entire month, so we almost have no day off. And so then we balance it, my husband and partner teaches, and then I teach. We also have a few more other people on our faculty that allows us to have an afternoon or something off. Sleep well, eat well, take a lot of baths, try and get your own massage if you can, once every few weeks. That's always really helpful and really grounding. And when you feel like you've had too much, I've learned that point where I feel overwhelmed and overloaded, to just trust to take the day off, and I give myself that permission.
That's a perfect advice for sure. How many days do you usually practice? Do you practice every day, or you have some days off when you just...
I practice every day, and part of that is just I've grown to do that because of my time in India. Now, practice means different things for people. Practice can be asana.
How can you describe your practice?
Yeah, and practice can be meditation. So I meditate and do pranayama every day. I wake up in the morning, and that's the first thing I do after having some water and doing a few little kriyas, a few little cleansing techniques. And that sort of sets my day up, Usually after that, I'll have a tea just so I can warm up a little bit, like into the world. I usually won't eat anything, and then I'll do some asana practice. And asana can range. If I have only a half an hour, I do a half an hour. If I have an hour, I do an hour. If I have an hour and a half, great, I do an hour and a half. That's when I'm here in the city. And then it sort of sets me up for the day as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Like, what is the minimum time you would allocate for doing this? Like, how much in advance do you usually set up your alarm to make sure you have this perfect start of your morning?
Yeah. Well, the minimum amount of time I would say for everything would be an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it doesn't mean like there are times when, say I have to get up early to go to the airport or something like that, and I always say this to people, like if you can only get up, like if you had 10 minutes and you only had 10 minutes to do something, do some sun salutations.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah, it will warm up your body, it will get you moving, it will get your prana flowing, and it's warming for the body, it kind of gets you going, and it gets you centered and it gets you focused. So that's a good practice if you only have like a few minutes, and honestly 10 minutes is better than nothing.
Exactly.
So as long, just everybody has that. So just like I think there's sometimes a thought in the mind, well, if I don't have an hour, if I don't have 2 hours, I'm not going to do anything. Do something and it feels good.
Yes. So what kind of message you would like to share with your students when you're teaching?
Yeah, I think that, if we look at the root of what the word is, yoga means in Sanskrit to yoke. It means to bring together. And we're bringing together our individual self, which is called the Jivatma, and the Paramatma, the Supreme Self. So that's what we're yoking. Sometimes people say the body, mind, and the spirit. But we're yoking, which basically coming to understand that we are divine, right? And so I feel that yoga and yoga practice, that there's an integration there that I hope that people find in a yoga practice, that it isn't just about movement and it just isn't about the playlist, but it's about some kind of message or some kind of understanding that can come through that, and some kind of connection that they can have, that they can breathe and they can connect and they can integrate inside of themselves. When we do that and we feel that connection, we feel whole, we feel satisfied, we feel like we've touched down, we feel like we've plugged back in. I think without that we can get really scattered and really, really disconnected, and then we're very unhappy. So it's not just in yoga philosophy, but it's in Buddhist philosophy that we as human beings suffer. So how can we alleviate that suffering? How can we remember who we are? How can we connect with who we are? And so I feel like I try in different ways to, that are in ways that people can maybe relate to, bring that in a yoga class where they can find some connection.
It's beautiful how you describe it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What kind of advice would you give to people who never practiced yoga but actually start discovering the subject and would like to try at some point of time?
I think that you just kind of have to do it. So go with a friend maybe at a studio that they like, that has been recommended, or a few people have recommended a studio. It's always good when there's a few people that you know and you like have recommended the same studio. Start off with an easier class. I get a lot of beginners coming to, a more advanced class just because the time is good for them. So start off with the appropriate level class and go to that class. And you want to feel good. You want to feel good in the environment. You want to feel good with that teacher. You want to feel good in that community. And if that resonates with you, come back again. And try and join up for an intro or a basics kind of, a 4-week course or something like that, because you really need to give it more than one try. It can be the case sometimes that you go for your first time and maybe it's not the appropriate level, or it's not the appropriate teacher, it's not the appropriate studio. Or practice. And so your experience isn't so great. Brush that off, get some more recommendations, come back in and try it again, because it's always a shame when that happens, because it's not really indicative of it. It's more indicative of the teacher or the practice or the level that's maybe just not quite right for you.
Would you recommend yoga videos?
If that's all you have, great, use a yoga video. there's nothing like being in the presence of a teacher and the energy that's in the room in a class. Videos don't really catch that, but if it's all you have, or if you're traveling, or if you're more remote, great, use a yoga video. It's a little bit limited because it's 2-dimensional and not 3-dimensional. You don't have a teacher watching over you. You don't have a teacher coming to be able to assist you at all and help you with what you're doing. So these are the things to consider, because the way in which we learn in a yoga class is we learn visually, we learn auditorially, and we learn tactile, in a kinesiology or kinesthetic way, we could say. So those 3 elements need to be there. With the video, it's just the audio and it's just the cues, but you don't really have the hands-on. And when a teacher comes in and assists you and adjusts you in a way of gets you in the right position alignment-wise, those big, huge light bulbs can go off and you can really understand things in a whole new way. That is very beneficial if you do want to continue practicing yoga.
Marla, I know that you also have your music band. Can you please tell us how you started it, why you started?
Yeah, sure. So, it's actually how Ron and I got together, my husband and co-owner of the studio. I learned chanting in India, and before Ron became a yogi, he was a musician, traveling musician and keyboardist. So it was really back in, the late 90s, right when Krishna Das first started chanting, and chanting kind of hit the scene. One of our other teachers, who's one of my best friends, Ananda Shakti Zinia, also a teacher at the studio of Downward Dog at that time, was also a little bit into chanting. And then I would sing in Shavasana, I always chant in Shavasana. And Ron kind of heard that we were both sort of into it a little bit, and he bought a new keyboard and wanted to kind of get back into music a little bit. And so he invited us over once a week to just jam a little bit. So that was really fun. We had a great time together. And then one day, she couldn't make it and only I came. And so we sat down at the piano. He says, I've been working on this piece a little bit. I want to play it to you. So he started to play and I started to chant, and we wrote a tune just in that moment. It was just done. And it ended up being the second song on our first CD that we did together. So we just started to write music together. It was easy, it would just flow. I would bring the chants to it, he would bring the tune. We would work on the tune and the chants together, and we would put it together. And then his father passed away, and right after his father passed away, my father got sick. And so we went through this really intense time with our fathers, and it was a very sad time for us. And the thing that helped us the most was writing music. And so we decided that we would go into the studio as a way to sort of heal from this whole thing. And we wrote our first CD, and we recorded our first CD, Salutations. And literally now when I listen to that CD, I start to cry because I just remember that time. But it was so healing for us to do. And then we just continued writing music. So we have Salutations. Then I have Prayers CD by my name, Meenakshi, and I did that in India. It's a solo album. Then we have Salutations is our first one. Our band is called Swaha. Then we did Vishnu's Dream, which is for yoga class. Then we did a CD called Bolo. Then we did small little songs, and then our last one is called Gone Beyond. And then we have 2 more CDs coming that we're still working on right now. We have a Shavasana CD of some of the songs that I sing in Shavasana. So we're just trying to find time to get that all done, but it is truly, truly, truly our joy to sing together and to share that with people.
It's very beautiful, especially when you're sitting at the end of the practice. It adds this special experience that you don't really get when you just listen to,
Thank you.
The recordings. Marla, I'm so grateful for your time. Where can people find you? Because I know you're traveling all over the world. You're participating in various teachers training. So please let us know.
Our studio here is called downwarddog.com. So usually we do post our schedule, of Ron and I, but then there's the studio schedule. Our music you can find at Swaha, SWAHA.ca, and you can download stuff there. We're also on iTunes and other such digital download sites. Our website, Swaha website, is a little outdated. Hopefully I'm going to update it soon, but mostly on social media. So you can find me on Facebook, Marla Meenakshi Joy, or on Instagram, Meenakshi Swaha. And I tend to post more things on social media those days. It seems to be more current and what people are...
Everyone is on social media
Yeah,
now.
and then we have wonderful social media here that Michelle at our studio does for Downward Dog. So you'll see some of the events that we do here as well.
Awesome. Yes, if you're ever in Toronto, that's the studio that you would like to check out, that's for sure. Marla, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you joining us on this journey, and I wish you the best, and I'll try to make to your classes more often because I really enjoy them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, blessings. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe for more soul stories.